So Cameron, just like state your name and your major and your
My name
pathways
is Cameron
advisor.
Whitacre. I'm a sophomore at Furman. I'm a health science major on the pre-med track, and I'm on the soccer team.
Great. Okay. So we're going to talk about the informational interviews and tell me a little bit about what your expectations were for the interviews. Had you ever done an informational interview before?
Um, so I really didn't have a lot of expectations going into the interview. I had actually seen the informational interview assignment on the Pathways syllabus before we ever started talking about it. I was actually super excited for it most of the semester. Most of the modules in Pathways were really like broad and conceptual up to this point. So I was kind of excited to do something that was more career focused for me, since I had pretty much known for most of my life I was interested in going to the medical field. So really, I was just kind of excited. I was a little nervous, but I had done interview assignments before, but I was just really excited about this one because I got to talk to a Furman alum, someone who we could share experiences with, someone who just really wasn't far out there from you, someone closer home. We had a lot like in common. So not a whole lot of expectations, but I was just excited for most of the semester.
And how did you feel going into the interview? Were you nervous at all when you first reached out, or how did that go?
Going into the interview, I was definitely a little nervous. Talking to a doctor over Zoom, there's a lot of nerves there, but I think mostly I was just really excited. I had done the preparation, so I was just really excited to hear what he had to say and get as much advice from him as I could in the 30 minutes.
And when you reached out to this doctor before you scheduled the interview, did you reach out immediately after you received the contact information from me, or did you wait a little bit? What methods, and then what method did you choose to meet? It sounds like you met on Zoom.
Yeah, definitely. Almost as soon as I received his contact information, I decided to reach out to him. I just sent a very professional email asking if he'd be willing to talk with me about his career path, his time at Furman. I figured the sooner I reached out to him, if I had any technology troubles or any trouble getting in touch with him, the sooner I reached out, the better. So I emailed him as soon as I could. I was pretty lucky in the fact that he emailed me back like within the day. So I didn't have really much trouble getting in touch with him at all. But he emailed me right back. We set up a Zoom call for the next week, and it was pretty much smooth sailing from there.
And then I know you talked about preparing for the interview. What sort of things did you do before you spoke with him? What did you do to prepare, to research a little bit?
So in order to prepare for my interview, the first thing I did before ever starting my questions, before even drafting any sort of questions, was I started researching my doctor, Dr. Sanders. I wanted to know as much basic information about him before I started drafting my questions, so that way I didn't waste any time asking really surface level questions. For example, like instead of asking Dr. Sanders, like, where did you go to med school? I had already Googled him, so I know that he went to MUSC. So I could ask questions like, I saw that you attended MUSC after you graduated Furman. Like, what set it apart from other med schools? Like, would you change anything about applying to MUSC if you could? That way I was just asking more deeper, more involved questions instead of asking like simple, like yes or no, like where did you go to med school? Did you like it? Just asking these more in-depth questions, it gave me better answers, and it kind of showed Dr. Sanders that I had prepared for the interview beforehand and that I wanted to be there as much as I needed him to be there.
I think that's an important point you bring up. A lot of students feel like they have to stick to their prepared questions, but it sounds like through your research, you were able to formulate questions, and then based on his answers, did you find it helpful just to ask questions based on his answers as well?
Yeah, definitely. Because especially when I was asking about his time at Furman, like naturally he started to reveal more stuff about his time at Furman. Like I actually found out he also was a D1 athlete at Furman. So once I found that out, I could kind of tie that in to more personal questions. Like, so like how was juggling pre-med and being a D1 athlete? So not only was that asking him to share more of his experiences, but it was kind of tying into my experiences as well. And I think naturally, like asking those follow-up questions allowed the conversation to move more smoothly. So it wasn't just like question, question, question. So it wasn't just like asking him a bulleted list. We were actually having a conversation, which I think was really important.
Out of all the questions that you asked, whether it's about personal, professional, was there one question or a couple of questions that you found to be the most helpful, or what you got the most out of?
I definitely like talking to him about his experiences applying to med school. I'm actually in a program at the Furman where I'm already guaranteed direct entry into med school. So it's kind of interesting hearing about his experiences and like what he would change with his time at Furman. So now I can start doing the things that he would change while I'm here instead of 10 years in the future looking back saying, oh, what did I wish I could do at Furman? Now he gave me some ideas of things I could try to do since I don't really have to worry about applying to med school. I can focus on doing other things. But I also really liked talking to him about the future of the field in general. So less like more about his experiences, but more about like what he thought was going to happen to the field in the future. So like asking him whether he thought it would stay more practice based or more hospital based. It was kind of interesting just to hear about his thoughts for the future as well.
Wow, that's really interesting. And then congratulations on getting into med school.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. In what ways, in Pathways, they talked a lot about the professional skills. What ways did this interview help you practice your professional skills?
I think obviously communication is the number one professional skill that you work on during this assignment in general. It's a lot different talking about communication skills and actually using them in the real world. So from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, setting up the email, using professional language in your email, learning how to follow up like appropriately, not like harassing your interviewee, just being very polite, like all the way through the process. So going along with communication, kind of professionalism too, like showing up to the interview dressed appropriately. You don't need to be in your pajamas, even though it's on Zoom. Just thinking about all those little things that you don't usually think about when you're going to class on Zoom or when you're writing an email to a friend. It's just, you have to think about everything when you're the one leading the interview with the professional.
Do you plan to keep in touch after this interview?
Yes, of course. I think that's one of the coolest parts about this assignment. Not only do you get the 30 minutes of the super helpful career advice, but if you leave a good impression by preparing your questions early and coming ready to ask more questions, if you leave that good impression, you now have a connection in your career field for a couple years in the future that you can lean back on.
That's great. And I know a lot of times students are confused by that, whether they need to be in touch or whatever, but I think we always welcome the opportunity for students to remain in touch, and especially given the career advice that that he can help you with in the future. That's wonderful. So what advice would you give to this next class of sophomores about this informational interview?
Probably just definitely take your time to do your research and craft your valuable questions in advance. I think that was the biggest thing for me, not asking those yes or no questions, asking questions that provoked an actual response, maybe a story from your interviewee, just something that can give you something that gives you the ability to ask more questions. The assignment really isn't that hard. It's not that stressful, but you definitely get out of it what you put into it. So the more work you do beforehand leads to a more natural conversation, which makes the whole interview less stressful and just more enjoyable for everyone involved.
Thank you. That is great advice. That's something that we love to hear because we do provide, hopefully, the tools for you to go ahead and research. We give you some information, and then for you to even go beyond that is really helpful as well.